Chapter 5. Verbs. Lesson 7. There had been no lesson of grammar during the whole week in order that Mary might have time to fix in her memory what she had already learned before she began anything new. At length she brought her exercise and showed her mother that she had gone through the whole of the story of the hen and chickens, and had found out in it the several parts of speech she had learned. Her mother then thought it time to proceed to the verbs. Mary accordingly fetched her grammar, and her mother read as follows. A verb is a word which signifies to be, to do, or to suffer. I cannot understand that at all, said Mary with a long face. You will like the verbs that do something best, said her mother, so we will begin with them. Come here, Mary. And as Mary approached, she added, Well, what are you doing now? I am going to you, Mamma, as you desired me. Then going is a verb. And how do you go? You see, Mamma, said Mary, smiling, I am walking. And is walking a verb too? Yes, certainly. Then Mary began to run. Now I am doing another verb, she said. Run must be a verb also. And presently she ran out of the room. Her mother wondered what she had gone for, but she soon heard her coming back with her skipping rope. And when she came in, she skipped very lightly around the room, looking all the while at her mamma and smiling, as much as to say, You see, I know that skipping is a verb too. When she reached the door, off she went again, but soon returned with her hoop, which she trundled around the table. Very well, Mary, I see that you understand that to skip and to trundle are verbs. But if you run away every time you find out a new verb, we shall not get on much. So now sit down on that chair. Mary seated herself, and her mother asked her what she was doing then. Nothing at all, Mamma. I am sure I cannot be doing a verb now, for I am sitting quite still. But there are some still, quiet verbs, Mary, as well as busy active ones. When you sit down, you do something, for you sit. Besides, you were speaking to me, and speak is a verb also. Mary began laughing. Oh, what a number of verbs there are, she said. To laugh is another verb, said her mother, and sometimes a very noisy one. So then you may do a verb, said Mary, without moving about, if to sit and to speak and to laugh are verbs. Yes, and you may do a verb, as you call it, even without the slightest motion of any part of your body, for the actions of the mind are verbs as well as those of the body. So, to think, to hope, to fear, to wish are verbs, as well as to ride, to walk, to eat, and to drink. While I was working this morning, Mamma, I was wishing that my cousins might come today, and hoping that they would, and thinking all about it. But it seemed to me that I did not do anything but work. Your body did nothing else, but your mind was active, as you describe, and your thoughts, Mary, are part of your mind. Then verbs not only express the actions of the mind and the body, but their state or manner of being. such as being hot or cold, or being hungry or tired, or being pleased or vexed. Well, I am sure I am always either being a verb or doing a verb, for I am always busy about something unless I am tired or sleeping, and those, are being verbs. Then, Mary, verbs do not only express the action or being of men, women, and children, but of all animals and all things. As the sky is bright, the flowers are faded, the nut is cracked, your frock is torn. Indeed, Mamma, said Mary, looking anxiously at her frock. I did not know it. Where is it? The rent will soon be mended, said her mother, smiling. It was only a make-believe example of the state of your frock. Oh, Mamma, there is one verb I want very much, said Mary. I am so hungry. To be hungry is a verb, it is true, replied her mother. But to want to be hungry is not very pleasant, in my opinion. Oh, no, Mamma. The verb I want is to eat. I rather think that you would like a noun substantive to eat, said her mother, giving her a slice of cake. Mary began eating, and between the mouthfuls she said, Now I have got the noun, and I am doing the verb. Having finished, she complained that the cake had made her thirsty. That is one of the still, quiet verbs, she said. But I should like to do one of the more busy verbs with a noun, Mamma. Can you guess what I mean? I think I can. You want to drink some water. Indeed, how cleverly you have guessed it. To drink was the verb, and water was the noun. I must tell you now, Mary, said her mother, that there are 3 different sorts of verbs, called active, passive, and neuter. I know what an active verb means, cried Mary. It is a busy verb, when you are doing something active, like that bird yonder. Look, Mamma, how fast it flies. I am sure to fly must be an active verb. No, my dear, an active verb means not only that you do something, but that you do it to somebody or to something else. When I say I love, I mean that I love somebody or something else, do I not? Yes, Mamma, you love me. But when the bird flies, his flying has nothing to do with anyone else. Yet, Mamma, you sit there quite still while you love me. How can that be an active verb? I think when I love you, Mary, so my thoughts are active, though I do not move. However, if you wish for something more active, come here. And she gave Mary a kiss. To kiss is an active verb, because you must kiss some person or thing. Now, Mary, if you are not satisfied, added she, laughing, I can strike you, and you will think that active enough. And she gave Mary several little taps. Oh, yes, I understand it, Mamma. Though the bird moved so fast when it flew along, it did not meddle with anybody or anything in flying. So to fly is not an active verb. Now can you tell me, said her mother, when Willie flies his kite, is it a verb active or not? Mary was puzzled. She pondered a little and then suddenly exclaimed, Oh, a verb active! To be sure, because he does not fly like a bird, but he flies his kite, and that, is making something else fly. So to fly a kite must be an active verb, though to fly is not. Her mother now told her that she had learnt enough of verbs for one lesson and that they would go on with them at the next. Continuation of verbs, Lesson 8. When Mary came with her grammar the following morning, her mother told her that the next sort of verb was called a passive verb, which means, she said, that instead of doing anything yourself, something is done to you. If you say, I am beaten, it means that someone beats you, while you remain passive. Indeed, Mamma, cried Mary, I should not remain passive if I were beaten. I should run away as fast as I could. And off she ran so close to the fire that her mother called out, Take care, Mary, if you go so near the fire, you will be burnt. Can you tell me what sort of verb to be burnt is? That would be something done to me, Mamma, for I am sure I should not do it myself. It hurts so. It would be something, not somebody, that burnt me, for it would be the fire that burnt me. But I suppose whether it is a thing or a person does not signify. No, said her mother, it makes no difference what it is that acts upon you. To be burnt, to be beaten, to be scolded are all passive verbs. I think passive verbs are very disagreeable, said Mary. One has nothing to do but remain quiet and suffer something to be done to you. No, said her mother, that is not necessary. If you were burnt, you would probably scream out for help and run away. But unless you extinguished the flames, so long as you were burnt by them, the verb would be passive. When you are acted upon, you are considered as passive, whether you remain quiet or not. To be caught is a passive verb, whether you struggle to get free or not. To be thrown down is a passive verb, though you are certainly in motion whilst falling. But you are put in motion by some person or thing acting upon you and making you fall. Oh, yes, said Mary, but if I throw myself down, it is an active, not passive verb. Yes, because you are, in that case, both the person who acts and the object acted upon. But all passive verbs, Mary, are not disagreeable. What do you think about the verb to be loved? Oh, that is very pleasant. But, Mamma, I thought you said the verb to love was an active verb. To love is an active verb, replied her mother, because you love another person. Therefore, you act upon another person. But to be loved is when another person acts upon you. You may say, I am loved by Sophie. Well, then, I should love Sophie in return. In that case, said her mother, you would return to the active verb to love. In the passive verb, you cannot act, nor even move, unless you are moved like a log or some other inanimate being, as when you are thrown down, or you may be pulled or pushed or driven or drawn. But the instant you move of your own accord, the verb is no longer passive. To be admired, to be praised, to be caressed are also agreeable passive verbs. Yet I like the active verbs the best, Mamma, because I have something to do myself. Then, said her mother, you will like the third kind of verb, which is called the neuter verb, For there you not only do something yourself, but you do it by yourself without acting on anything else. What, like the bird that flew, Mama? Exactly. To fly is a neuter verb, and so is to walk and to run. Let me think of some neuter verbs, Mama. To cough, to sneeze, to sit, to stand, to sleep must all be neuter verbs. For when I do those verbs, I do not meddle with anybody or anything else. True, said her mother. But now, Mary, we have been talking so long about verbs that I think we must go into the garden to refresh ourselves. So run and put on your bonnet. Mary was soon ready, and they went out. Look at that snail, Mamma, said she. How slowly it crawls. To crawl is a neuter verb. I remember that. But I will make it go a little faster. She gathered a twig and touched the snail with it. The snail drew in its horns. Oh, poor little snail, said her mother, do not hurt it. Indeed, I did not hurt it, Mamma. It is only frightened. To be frightened is a passive verb, for the snail is passive while I frighten it. But, she added, if I say I frightened the snail, that must be an active verb. True, because you act upon the snail. To frighten is an active verb, because you must frighten someone. But to be frightened is a passive verb, because the frightened creature is passive. Yes, but Mamma, the snail, when it was frightened, drew in its horns. Then it became active, for to draw in your horns is an active verb. Then, Mamma, the snail is both active and passive at the same time, for I am sure it is frightened when it draws in its horns. It is active, replied her mother, in the verb to draw in its horns, and passive in the verb to be frightened. Mary's attention was soon called off by the sight of a man beating a dog. Oh, Mamma, she exclaimed, look at that naughty man. I am sure to beat is an active verb. See how his arm moves, and what blows he gives the poor dog, who stands quite passive. I wish, Mamma, continued she, that when we go in you would write down some active and some passive and some neuter verbs, as you did the degrees of comparison of the adjectives. And when they returned to the house, her mother took a pen and wrote as follows. Active, passive, neuter. To love, to be loved, to dance. To hate, to be hated, to rise. To lay, to be laid, to lie. To send, to be sent, to sit. To tease, to be teased, to stir. To bid, to be bidden, to run. To tell, to be told, to leap. Why, Mamma, cried Mary, the active and the passive verbs in this list are all the same. I do not mean the same verbs, but the same things. That is generally the case, said her mother. Reflect a little, and you will find it so. If you love, there must be some object to be loved. You may love Sophie, or you may love strawberries, or you may love pictures. The active verb, you know, means that there is some object to be acted upon. Sophie, strawberries, and pictures are the objects you act upon, while they, being loved, form the passive verb. Oh, yes, to be sure, said Mary. I did not think of that, If I tease somebody, there must be somebody to be teased. You, Mary, who tease, are the active person, and called the agent of the verb, and the person who is teased, the object of the verb. Try to remember those distinctions. There is a great deal more to be learnt about verbs, my dear, but I think you have had enough of them for the present. Oh, but a little story at the end, Mamma. You will not forget that. Now I shall have 5 sorts of words to look out for: nouns, pronouns, adjectives, articles, and verbs. Very well, Mary. I will write you a story for tomorrow. The Fisherman. A fisherman and his wife, who were very poor, lived in a little hut by the side of a river. They had 2 children, Jack, a stout lad, 11 years old, and Jenny, who was only 8. The fisherman had a boat in which he and his son used to go to the river to lay their nets. When they caught plenty of fish, they were very glad, because they took them to the next market town and sold them. For several days the fisherman had caught but very few fish, and when he had but few fish to sell, he could get but little money to buy food. For a long time the family had nothing but bread and potatoes for dinner, and the poor children longed for a little meat and some milk for their bread at breakfast. One day the fisherman, in drawing up his nets, felt that they were very heavy. "Well, we have caught a fish or 2 at last," he said. "Come, Jack, lend us a hand to heave in the nets." This was soon done, when, to the surprise of both father and son, only 3 fish were found in them. One of them, it is true, was very large, but it was still more remarkable for its weight. "Why, one would think this fish was made of lead," said the fisherman. "There must be something inside." When the fish was dead, he ripped it open, and what should he find instead of lead but an old purse full of gold? "Well, good luck has come at last," cried the fisherman. "This money is just in time to pay my quarter's rent, but here's enough to last for years, and I promise you a new suit of clothes, Jack. And there's enough to buy a new gown for Jenny, too, father, is there not? Aye, and for your mother and all." They hastened home with their newly found treasure, and the wife was no less pleased than they were. But she could not help saying, "What a sad thing it must be to the poor man who lost it." "Poor man," repeated her husband. "I think he must be a rich one to have so much gold." "Aye, while he had it," she replied. "But now that he has lost it, he must be poor." "Mayhap he may have a deal more," said the fisherman. "However, there is no finding out whom it belonged to once, so now it belongs to me, who have fished it up." "I wonder how it got into the river," cried Jack. "And how the fish came to swallow it," said Jenny, "for gold is not good to eat." "No, but it will buy many things that are," replied her father, "and I promise you a rare dinner tomorrow. What do you say to a beefsteak pudding and a pot of ale?" They counted over 20 guineas. The fisherman's wife rubbed them as bright as she could and put them into her husband's leathern purse. And she gave the old purse, which was quite worn out, to Jenny. There were 2 metal rings or runners to this purse, and little Jenny tried to rub them bright as her mother had done the guineas. When the dirt and rust were rubbed off, she saw that there were letters engraved on the runners, and she took them to her brother, who could read a little. He examined the letters a long time, and at last made out these words: Mr. Colin, Heath Lodge. "Good heavens!" exclaimed the mother. "This purse belongs to Mr. Colin, and we must restore it," she added with a heavy sigh. "But father found it," said Jack, "and if he had not fished it up, Mr. Colin could never have had it." "That don't signify," replied her mother. "Whatever is found must be restored to the owner if you can find out who he is." The fisherman agreed with his wife. They regretted very much all the good things they had intended to buy with the gold, but it was settled that the next morning, while the fisherman went to draw his nets, Jack and Jenny should carry the gold to Heath Lodge, which was about 2 miles off. The next morning away they trudged, and as they went they talked of the number of things they could have bought with so much gold. "If father had kept but one of the guineas, it would have bought us new clothes, and one good dinner at least," said Jenny. "And I think that would have been but fair, as he found the purse." "Father knows best," replied Jack, "and he said that it would not be honest to keep back a single penny, but that perhaps the gentleman would make us a present for taking back the money." "Oh, I dare say he will," cried Jenny. "What do you think he will give us?" "Indeed, I can't tell," said the lad. "But mind you don't ask for anything. Look, yonder's the house. Now take care to behave yourself, Jenny, and make a low curtsy as soon as you see the gentleman." When they were shown into Mr. Collin's room, Jenny dropped one of her best curtsies. Jack took off his hat, scraped his foot, and then holding out the purse, "There's your purse, sir," said he. "Father found it inside of a fish." Mr. Colin was astonished at the sight of his purse. "It is no less than 2 years," he said, "since I lost it. It dropped into the river one day when I was rowing, and I never expected to see it again. The purse is spoiled, it is true, but there is every guinea in it safe." "The runners are not spoiled," said Jenny, "for I rubbed them bright, and so Jack read your name." "You are very good children," said Mr. Colin, "and I thank you for restoring my purse." Jack made his bow and was going away, but Jenny was so much disappointed that Mr. Colin had made them no present that she burst into tears. "What's the matter, my dear?" said Mr. Colin. "Oh, nothing at all, sir," cried Jack. "Come, Jenny, don't be so silly. She is only crying about the new gown father had promised her, and the beefsteak pudding and ale for dinner." "Aye, and father can't pay his rent neither," sobbed Jenny, willing to defend herself from being thought guilty of selfishness. "And why not?" inquired Mr. Colin. "Oh, sir, because he is so poor. When he found this purse, he thought the money was all his own, till I rubbed the runners bright, and Jack read your name upon them, and then he said it would be dishonest to keep it." "That is very true," said Mr. Colin. "You did quite right to bring back the purse. Tell your father that I shall go and see him tomorrow morning to thank him for restoring the money." Jack again made his bow, and Jenny dropped her curtsy with as good a grace as she could, when Mr. Colin chucked her under the chin, and smiling archly said, "Beefsteak pudding, was it, lassie? Would not beefsteak pie do as well?" Jenny could not understand what he meant, but thinking his joke rather ill-timed, replied pettishly, We shan't have either, sir." They then trudged home in sober sadness. The following morning Mr. Colin did not fail to keep his promise of calling at the cottage of the fisherman, and after thanking him for his purse, inquired particularly into his circumstances and in what way he might be of service to him. He learnt that the ill success of fishing, which had brought the fisherman into distress, proceeded in great measure from the badness of his nets. He declared he spent all his spare time in mending them, but they were so completely worn out that it was almost labor lost. Mr. Colin then asked the dame what it was she was in most need of. She thanked his honor and said she had a fine large pig, which would serve them for bacon throughout the winter, if she could buy meal to fatten and salt to cure it, but she had not money for either. Mr. Colin then turned to the children and inquired whether they went to school. "No," said the fisherman, "though they have a mighty desire to go, for some of their playmates go to the school, but I have not the means to send them, for it would be as good as cheating my landlord to pay for my children's schooling whilst I cannot pay my rent." "Well, do not let that disturb you, my good friend," said Mr. Colin. "You owe your landlord nothing." The fisherman stared, when Mr. Colin continued, "I learnt from little Jenny there that you were at a loss for your rent, and I sent and paid it this morning. You are rent-free to this time 12-month. Then, if your children will attend school diligently, I will pay their schooling. What say you?" said he, addressing himself to them. "Oh, I shall never fail," answered Jack, "unless father wanted me to draw the nets, but I could lend a hand at that between school hours." Jenny was vastly pleased, but looked at her mother, who answered for her that she would be very regular in her attendance, "for," she added, "though it may give me somewhat more to do at home, I am sure in the end it will answer better for myself as well as the girl that she should be a bit of a scholar. No one knows but those who can't read and write what a thing it is to have a child that can. Why, even the little that Jack knows is of great use to us. You see, sir," added the good woman, with a great simplicity, "it was Jack found out your name on the runners of the purse. Then, sir, it is a mighty savings to have one's clothes mended neat and strong. We can botch them up after a manner, but the girls at the sewing school would be ashamed of such work. Why, they would set you in a patch that you shan't be able to find out." Mr. Colin then took leave and said that they should hear from him again the next day. Accordingly, the next day, a cart of Mr. Colin's drove up to the cottage door, and a variety of things were brought into the house. First, there was a sack of meal to fatten the pig, and a bag of salt to cure it. Then came a large beefsteak pie, and a small barrel of beer. The children's eyes sparkled with pleasure, but what was their delight when 2 parcels were opened, in which they found a complete suit of clothes for each of them. The man who drove the cart bade Jenny observe that the close straw bonnet and the warm cloth cloak were for her to wear in cold weather, to go to church and to school. Jenny, who dearly loved a little finery, jumped about for joy. Lastly, there was a package of new nets for the fisherman. In short, there was not one of the family who had not cause to rejoice. and to be grateful to Mr. Collin for the kind return he made them for their honesty. The school was a source of great improvement to the children. The fisherman and his wife worked hard to do without their aid. The pig was fattened and, in due time, salted. And the fish, when once in the net, finding no holes in it through which they could escape, were brought safe ashore, and by their sale afforded the family a comfortable maintenance. Chapter 6 of Mary's Grammar. Adverbs. We now come to the part of speech called adverbs. Can you guess what that means, Mary? Adverb, repeated Mary thoughtfully. That must be something added to a verb. So I suppose it's like an adjective added to a noun to show what sort of noun it is. Something like, replied her mother, but not quite, for the adverb does not point out what sort of verb. The verb itself shows that. If you say, I dance, or he strikes, the sort of action is described by the verb itself, without any adverb being joined to it. Then what does an adverb show, Mamma? Several things, replied her mother. In the first place, it shows the manner of the verb. You can read, Mary, but in what manner do you read? Oh, Mamma, I hope I can read well, now that I am 7 years old. Then well is an adverb added to the verb to read. I do not say that it is one which always points out your manner of reading, for sometimes you read carelessly. Ah, Mamma, cried Mary. That is an adverb too, and sometimes I read too fast. Is that an adverb? Yes. And sometimes indistinctly. Oh, what a number of adverbs there are to describe my manner of reading, said Mary, laughing. I wish you would keep to the first, Mary, and always read well. Or, if you wish to add other adverbs, let them be to read slowly, distinctly, fluently, prettily. I think, Mamma, the adverbs all end in ly. Not all. Those that end in ly are taken from adjectives. Slow, distinct, fluent, pretty are adjectives which show the quality of the noun. Slowly, distinctly, fluently are adverbs which show the manner of the verb. You say a slow horse, a distinct reader, a fluent tongue, a pretty child. Then if you add ly to those adjectives, you change them into the adverbs slowly, distinctly, fluently, and prettily, and you add them to verbs instead of to nouns. Now let me see, Mamma, whether I cannot find out an adjective that may be changed into an adverb. She thought a little, then said, This is a nice cake. Nice is the adjective, and nicely the adverb. Yes, you may say it is nicely baked. Nice, you see, is the adjective belonging to the noun cake, and nicely the adverb belonging to the verb to bake. I will write down a few adjectives with their corresponding adverbs. Dirty, dirtily, sweet, sweetly, wide, widely, high, highly, fresh, freshly, new, newly. I wonder, Mamma, said Mary, that adjectives are not called adnouns. I should remember much more easily what they meant. I shall never forget what adverb means, because the word tells you at once. But I must guess to what an adjective is to be added. Very true, my dear, but we cannot take upon ourselves to change the names which grammarians have given to the different parts of speech. Then, Mary, besides the adverb which shows the manner of the verb, there are others which point out the place in which it is done, as I stand here, I walk thither, she went hence, he will go anywhere. Pray, Mamma, let me find out some of the adverbs that show the place. I thought my thimble was there, she said, opening a workbox. But, she added, looking about, I can find it nowhere. Very well, Mary. That is, if it is only an example you are supposing, and that you have not really lost your thimble. Oh, no. Here it is, said Mary, smiling and lifting up her forefinger. This is not all, continued her mother. There are some adverbs which relate to the time in which the verb is performed, as I eat now. John will go soon. He has been already. Now it is my turn, Mamma. I dance often, but I seldom draw. He will write presently. Will you go directly? The next class of adverbs, said her mother, points out the number of times the verb is performed, as I spoke once, or twice, or 100 times. Oh, what a great deal of speaking, exclaimed Mary. And are 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the numbers adverbs? No, because they do not relate to the verb, but to the noun. You say 1 apple, 2 houses, 10 men, and so on. Then the numbers are adjectives? Said Mary. Yes, they do not, it is true, exactly show the quality of the noun, but they point out its number. When you mention the number of the verb, you do not say, I wrote 1, but I wrote once. Well, said Mary, I do think so many different sorts of adverbs is a little puzzling. You have at least learned enough of them today, my dear, replied her mother. Go and take a run in the garden to refresh yourself. Continuation of adverbs, Lesson 10. In order to be able to recollect all the different sorts of adverbs, my dear, said Mary's mother to her, you must class them in regular order in your memory. Yes, said Mary, I must put them in order in my head, as I do my doll's clothes in her chest of drawers. Very well, replied her mother, smiling at the comparison, and put each class in a separate drawer. How droll, said Mary, laughing, that my head should be like a chest of drawers. I hope it is like a tiny chest of drawers, Mary. I have known some little girls whose drawers were in such confusion that when they want anything in them, they do not know in which drawer to look for it. And when that is the case, she added, looking archly at Mary, I cannot help suspecting that their heads are in the same sort of confusion. Yes, but I do not think you know such a little girl just now, Mamma. For if you recollect, you praised me the other day for having my drawers in such tidy order. Well, then, it is to be hoped, Mary, that I shall find your head so too. Now let us see how many drawers you must have to keep the adverbs in. Do you recollect how many we have already mentioned? Let me see, said Mary, thinking. Why, first I must have a drawer, and a pretty large one, for the adverbs relating to the manner of the verb. There are so many of them, such as prettily, cleverly, nicely. Then another for adverbs relating to place, as here, there, everywhere. Then a third drawer for adverbs relating to time, as now, then, presently. That need not be so large a drawer, I believe. And lastly, a little tiny drawer will be big enough for the adverbs that relate to number, as once, twice, thrice, and away, she said. And then she set off with a hop, skip, and a jump, and ran to the other end of the room, an exercise which never failed to relieve her mind when weary of thinking. But, my dear, said her mother, you know that we have not finished the adverbs. There are several other classes for you to learn. Then I must have some more drawers to put them in. And pray, what are they? The next class of adverbs relates to the quantity of the verb, as, you have read enough. He has eaten sufficiently. Another class of adverbs asks questions, as, how do you do? What do you say? Why should we go? When shall we set out? Oh, yes, I know those are questions, because there is a note of interrogation. But what does that have to do with a verb? In the sentence, how do you do? How relates to the verb to do, and means, how does your health do? In what do you say? What relates to the verb to say, and so on. Mary inquired whether there were any adverbs that answered questions. Yes, there are, replied her mother, especially two little words that you are very fond of. Mary wondered what they could be. Suppose I were to ask whether you have read today, what would you answer? I should say yes, for I have read a long chapter in the history of England with Miss Thompson. But supposing that you have not read today, then I should say no. Well, then yes and no are adverbs, and so are all other words that reply to a question, such as perhaps, surely, certainly, by no means, not at all. But, Mamma, said Mary, yes and no by themselves cannot relate to any verb. I beg your pardon. If you say yes in answer to my question, have you read, you mean to say, yes, I have read. You see, therefore, that yes, by itself, refers to the verb to read, though the verb is not mentioned. Some adverbs have degrees of comparison, as often, oftener, oftenest, well, better, best. But, Mamma, said Mary, interrupting her, You said that good, better, best were adjectives. Good, replied she, is always an adjective, but better and best are sometimes adjectives and sometimes adverbs. Oh, that is very puzzling. And in my parsing lessons, how am I to find out whether they are adjectives or adverbs? By observing whether they relate to nouns or to verbs. If I say, I spoke well, you spoke better, but Henry spoke best. The words well, better, best are adverbs because they relate to the verb to speak. But if you say a good child, a better child, the best child, the degrees of comparison relate to the noun child and are therefore adjectives. Yes, and then you must say good instead of well, for it would be nonsense to say a well child. Whenever, said her mother, the two degrees of comparison, better and best, are used as adverbs, the positive is well, and when they are used as adjectives, the positive is good. Let me find out an example, Mama. First, for adjectives. I am a good dancer. Sophie is a better dancer, but Ellen dances best. Stop, said her mother. There is an error in your example. Try if you can find it out. Mary repeated the phrase slowly and deliberately, but she thought in vain and could not discover the fault. What can it be, Mamma? Said she. In the first two degrees of comparison, replied her mother, you are right. But when you said Ellen dances best, the word best relates to the verb dances and not the noun dancer. To be sure, said Mary, I did not think of that. A dancer is a person and a noun, while dances is the verb. And is it wrong to mix the adjectives and the adverbs so in one sentence? Not at all, replied her mother. Now, Mary, I believe that we have gone through the different classes of adverbs. Do you think that you can recollect them all? I will try, Mamma. An adverb is a word added to a verb to show something that relates to it. First, the manner of the verb, as he speaks well. Secondly, the place of the verb, as Ellen came here. Thirdly, the time of the verb, as I write now. Fourthly, the number of the verb, as they drank twice. Fifthly, adverbs that ask questions, as what shall we do? Sixthly, those which answer questions, as yes, no. Oh, but Mamma, I must have two more drawers for my questions and answers, for you know that I did not reckon them in my chest of drawers. Very true, Mary, said her mother, and I think we may now take leave of adverbs, and for tomorrow I have prepared a story instead of a lesson. Mary was pleased to hear this, for though she now liked her lessons of grammar, she liked the stories still better. The Sponge Cakes. Mrs. Burton was one day walking in the fields with her little daughter Harriet, who skipped on before her through the grass. The gay flowers sprung up beneath her feet, and smelt very sweet. But she did not stop to gather them, for she was impatient to reach the village where they were going to the pastry cook's. Harriet had sixpence of her own to lay out, and all the way she went she was thinking what sort of cake she would buy. For herself she liked plum buns, but she meant also to buy a cake for her little sister Fanny, and she was not sure what she would like best. In their way they stopped at Mrs. Spruce's, the washerwoman's cottage, as Mrs. Burton had some directions to give her. Mrs. Spruce had a pretty little daughter called Alice, who often accompanied her mother when she carried home Mrs. Burton's linen from washing, and then Harriet and Alice sometimes played together. So Harriet was very glad to call at the cottage to see Alice, and she ran forward and, opening the little garden gate, called out, "Alice, Alice!" But no Alice answered. When they went in, they saw poor Alice sitting quite still in a low chair, and looking so pale and ill that she seemed as if she had not the strength to move. "What is the matter with poor Alice?" inquired Mrs. Burton. "Indeed, madam, I cannot say," replied Mrs. Spruce. "She has been in this downcast way for this week and more. The doctor calls it a sort of low fever, but no wonder she is so weak, for I can get her to eat nothing. The only thing she fancies is a bit of sponge cake. A lady gave her one last Wednesday, but it is all gone, and I cannot afford to buy her any more." "Does the doctor think it good for her to eat sponge cake?" inquired Mrs. Burton. "He says it will do her no harm if she wishes it." Soon after Mrs. Burton and her little daughter left the cottage, and as they walked towards the village, they could talk of nothing but poor Alice. When they reached the pastry cook's, Mrs. Burton asked Harriet if she had made up her mind what she should buy. "Oh, yes, mamma, sponge cakes," and she inquired how many she could have for sixpence. She was told 3, and 3 sponge cakes were put in a piece of paper and given to her, and she paid for them. "I thought, my dear," said her mother, "that you had intended to buy plum buns." "So I did, mamma, but I have bought these cakes for poor Alice. She can eat nothing else, you know, while I am hungry for everything. So it is much better Alice should have the cakes than for me to have buns." "You are a good child," said her mother, giving her a kind kiss, "to think what will please others rather than yourself. But then little Fanny, will she like to go without her cake? She is too young to care about Alice." "Oh, she does not know anything about the cake, mamma, for I did not tell her I should give her one. I meant to surprise her, so she will not be disappointed." When they approached the cottage on their way home, Harriet hastened forward, pushed open the garden gate, and was soon in the house. Then she opened her little parcel and gave one of the cakes to Alice. Poor Alice smiled, and though it was but faintly, Harriet was delighted to see her face, which was before so melancholy, look pleased. Alice tasted a little bit and said it was very good, but she would not eat much, saying that she would keep the rest for another time. "Oh, here are 2 more cakes," said Harriet eagerly, "and they are all for you, Alice." "How good you are, my dear young lady," said Mrs. Spruce. "You have made poor Alice quite happy." Harriet felt quite happy too. She was much happier than if she had eaten the cake herself. She was so glad to do some good to poor Alice. In her way home, she gathered a quantity of field flowers. "I shall give some of them to Fanny," she said, "instead of the cake, and then she will be pleased too." Harriet liked to please everyone, but she herself was the happiest of anyone because she enjoyed making others happy. Chapter 7 of Mary's Grammar. Prepositions. Lesson 11. At the next lesson, Mary's mother asked her what the grammar said about prepositions. "Prepositions," repeated Mary. What a long, hard word. Her mother took up the book and pointed out the place to her daughter, who read as follows: "Prepositions serve to connect nouns together and to show the relation between them." "I do not know what relation means," continued she, "unless it's like Uncle and Aunt Howard and my cousins, who are all our relations." "They are called our relations," replied her mother, "because they belong to the same family that we do. But the relation between words is not quite the same thing. You will understand it if I give you an example. Here is a table. That is a noun. And there is a chair. That is another noun. Now, if I say, put the chair by the table, by is the preposition which shows the relation between the table and the chair. If I left out the preposition and said, put the chair the table, you could not understand what I meant. No, indeed, Mamma, for it would be nonsense. But the little word by explains it all very clearly. Now, said her mother, can you tell me what relation there is between this book and the table? The book does not stand by the table like the chair, said Mary. It lies on the table. And which is the preposition? Mary thought a little, and then replied, the book lies. No, it is not lies, for lies is the verb. It is what the book does. Then she suddenly exclaimed, on the table. Yes, on is the word which shows the relation between the book and the table. You are right, said her mother. Now where is the footstool? It is under the table, answered Mary. And I guess that under is the preposition. Now, Mamma, I run round the table. Is not round a preposition also? Yes, it is when used in that sense, but if you say, that is a round table, round would not, in that case, show the relation of the table to anything else, so round would not then be a preposition. Oh, but I know what it would be, Mamma. It would be an adjective, for it would show what sort of table it was. Mary, having run once or twice round the table, placed one of her feet upon the footstool, and springing up, seated herself upon the table. Now, Mamma, she said, what is the preposition that connects me with the table? On or upon, which you like best, but I fear that my table may suffer from your frolics. So you had better come down and sit in the chair near the table. Oh, yes, near is a preposition, and she seated herself on the side of the table opposite to her mother, who said, Here, Mary, catch this ball of worsted which I'm going to throw over the table. Mary caught it and asked how over could be a preposition, for the ball had not touched the table. That is true, replied her mother, yet over shows the relation between the ball and the table. The table was underneath, while the ball went over it. The chair which stands by the table does not necessarily touch it, nor does the footstool which is under the table. Well, let us now try something else besides the table, said Mary. There is a man walking across the street. Can you find out the preposition? Let me see. It is across. Yes, across shows the relation between the two nouns, man and street. Now he's going into that house, Mamma. Oh, she cried, pleased at the discovery. Into is a preposition between man and house. And now he is gone upstairs, for see, he is looking out of the window. But Mamma, is up a preposition? For there is only one noun in the sentence. He is gone upstairs. Who was it that went upstairs, my dear? Oh, the man, to be sure. But I did not say the man. No, but you said he went upstairs. What did he mean? He is the pronoun put instead of the man noun. That is true. And it is just the same as if you said the man went upstairs. So then, a preposition shows the relationship between a noun and a pronoun, as well as between two nouns. Certainly, or between two pronouns. You stand by me. You and me are both pronouns, and by shows their relation to each other. He speaks to her, said Mary. To is the preposition which relates to the pronouns he and her. I think, Mary, I have nothing more to tell you about prepositions. So we will now finish the lesson, and tomorrow we shall proceed to conjunctions. And as there is but very little to say on interjections, we may comprise them in the same lesson, and then I have a long story for the conclusion. Chapter 8 of Mary's Grammar. Conjunctions. Lesson 12. Conjunctions are words that have not much meaning in themselves, but serve the purpose of joining words or parts of sentences together. If I say, fetch me a pen and some writing paper, the sentence consists of two parts joined together by the little word and. Oh, yes, I understand, said Mary. The first part of the sentence is, fetch me a pen, and the second part, some writing paper. And the little word and joins them both together, and so it is called a conjunction. Now, Mamma, let me try to think of a sentence. Then, after a pause, she said, I will fetch my doll and her cradle. And then she suddenly exclaimed, Why, Mamma, how very like conjunctions are to prepositions. You know that a preposition shows the relation between two nouns, and the conjunction and does just the same thing, for it shows the relation between pen and paper and between my doll and her cradle. No, Mary, it joins the words, but it does not show how they are related to each other. When I say bring me a pen and some writing paper, I mean nothing more than that you should bring me those two things. But I do not point out any connection between them. Oh, but you know, Mamma, I must think that you're going to write. And then I am sure that there is a great connection between the pen and the paper. You may think what you please, my dear, said her mother, smiling. but there is no relationship between them pointed out by the little word and. If I had said, "Bring me my pen on the writing paper," or "in the writing paper," that would show a connection, for the pen would be placed in or on the paper. "Oh, yes," said Mary, "and if I said, 'I will fetch my doll in her cradle,' instead of 'and her cradle,' I should say a preposition instead of a conjunction." "Besides," said her mother, "and is not only used to join nouns together, but any two parts of a sentence whatever. Thus I may say, 'Bring your book and come and read.' There is the noun book in the first part of the sentence, and the latter part consists of two verbs." "And there are two conjunctions, Mamma, for the two verbs are also joined by and." "Yes, you know I told you that conjunctions served to join words as well as sentences together. But we have talked a great deal about the word and, Mary, without mentioning any other conjunction. You may play with your doll if you please." "Oh, yes, if joins the two parts of the sentence quite as well as and seems to have more meaning in it." "There are a great many more conjunctions," said her mother. "I will ride or I will walk. I shall drive to Highgate, but not to Hampstead. I will go with you, Mamma, if you will let me." I hope it is true and not merely playing at finding out conjunctions. "Well, my dear, tomorrow perhaps you may. But you may now think only of your lesson, for unless you are very attentive, you can go neither to Hampstead nor to Highgate." "What a number of conjunctions!" exclaimed Mary. "Observe," said her mother, "the change which different conjunctions make in the meaning of a sentence. If, instead of saying, 'I will give you an orange and an apple,' I should say, 'I will give you an orange or an apple.'" "Oh, but it's not the same thing at all, Mamma. I like the conjunction and much the best. It has a great deal more meaning than I thought at first, for it joins the real apple and the orange together, as well as the words apple and orange, and then you give me both." "Very true, Mary. Now those conjunctions which join things or actions together are called copulative conjunctions, and those which disjoin them are called disjunctive conjunctions." "Oh dear, what long words!" exclaimed Mary. "When I say you may either ride or walk, what sort of conjunction is either?" "Disjunctive," said Mary, "because it disjoins walking and riding, for it means that you will do one or the other, but not both." "But how can a conjunction both join and disjoin things at the same time, Mamma?" "You must distinguish between things and words," replied her mother. "A conjunction always joins the words or the parts of which the sentence is composed, but it does not always join the things or the actions the sentence talks about." "Oh, yes," said Mary, "it joins the two words walk and ride, but it does not join the two things walking and riding." "I see you understand it, Mary, but you do not express it well. You should not say the two things, but the two actions, for you know that walking and riding are verbs, not nouns, and therefore cannot be things." "Yes," said Mary, "they are actions, and an action means doing the verb, Now, let me find out some disjunctive conjunctions. Sophie will neither eat nor drink. Those are disjunctive conjunctions. But if I say she both eats and drinks, the conjunction and is copulative because it joins the actions eating and drinking, as well as the words eat and drink. Very well, or you might say, Sophie will eat as well as drink. I think we now may take leave of conjunctions and proceed to interjections.